History is often written as a straight line of inevitable progress, a constant march from the primitive to the sophisticated. But what if the turning point of human civilization was missed by nearly 2 millennia? Imagine, in the middle of the 1st century, the people of Alexandria witnessing a metal sphere spinning at high speeds, powered by nothing but the invisible force of steam. This was the Aeolipile, the invention of Heron of Alexandria. It was a steam turbine that worked, it was elegant, and it was perfectly capable of doing work. So, why did it take 1700 years for the world to pick up where Heron left off? Elias Untold Vance here, and today, on About Untold History, we are stepping into the workshops of the ancient world to solve a mystery of lost potential. We are looking at why one of the greatest inventions in human history was relegated to a toy for the elite, and why the industrial age almost began in the shadows of the Roman Empire. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. To understand the magnitude of the Aeolipile, one must first dismantle the modern perception of ancient history as a monolithic era of primitive survival. In the cosmopolitan hub of 1st century Alexandria, a city that served as the intellectual crucible of the Mediterranean, Heron, a mathematician, engineer, and scholar, was engaged in work that would have been indistinguishable from high-level physics in the early modern era. The Aeolipile, detailed in his foundational work Pneumatica, was not a desperate prototype or a theoretical sketch. It was a functioning steam turbine. The design was deceptively simple. A hollow metal sphere mounted on the central axis, connected to a boiler beneath it by a pipe. When water was heated to produce steam, the vapor traveled up the pipe into the sphere and escaped through 2 L-shaped nozzles bent in opposite directions. The resulting reactive force caused the sphere to spin at remarkable velocities. To a contemporary observer, this was a display of magics or a sophisticated plaything. To the modern engineer, it is the fundamental blueprint for a reaction turbine, identical in principle to the massive power plants that generate electricity. Today, the genesis of this invention was rooted in the Alexandrian obsession with automata and mechanical curiosities. Heron was a polymath who lived within the tradition of Ctesibius and Philo of Byzantium, men who viewed the physical world through the lens of pneumatic, hydraulic, and mechanical principles. They were fascinated by the behavior of vacuums, the properties of air, and the force of water. The Aeolipile was effectively the logical conclusion of their experimentation with closed-system fluid dynamics. In Heron's world, the Aeolipile was categorized alongside elaborate water clocks, self-playing pipe organs, and automated temple doors. It was a demonstration of the mastery over the elements, a testament to the belief that natural forces could be diverted and controlled by human ingenuity. However, this categorization itself reveals a crucial limitation in the ancient perspective. Because the device was perceived as a theatrical wonder or a tool for religious awe, its transformative potential as a prime mover, performing heavy industrial labor, was entirely obscured by the cultural expectations of the time. Yet, we must acknowledge that Heron's engine was not just a historical anomaly. It was a manifestation of a highly sophisticated metallurgical and mathematical culture. To forge such a device required the ability to cast thin-walled, pressure-tight bronze spheres, a feat of metalworking that suggests an advanced understanding of thermal expansion, alloy consistency, and pressurized sealing. The technical capacity was present. The mathematical framework to calculate the relationship between volume, pressure, and kinetic output was budding, even if it lacked the formal nomenclature of Newtonian calculus. The existence of the Aeolipile proves that the bottleneck of the Industrial Revolution was not a deficit in basic engineering skill or raw materials. The Alexandrians possessed the clay, the coal, the water, and the bronze. They possessed the intellect to refine these into a working turbine. The failure was not in the machine, but in the interface between the machine and the socio-economic apparatus of the Roman world. Furthermore, the environment in which Heron worked was one of immense stability and relative wealth. Yet it was an environment that prioritized labor-intensive maintenance over labor-saving innovation. Heron's engine existed in the shadow of the Pharos Lighthouse and the Great Library, centers of civilization that prioritized the storage of knowledge and the maintenance of political order. The Aeolipile was a product of this intellectual elite, a class of people who had the luxury to ponder the mechanics of steam, but who were ultimately removed from the practical, grimy realities of agrarian production or mass manufacturing. The engine was a masterpiece of luxury engineering, disconnected from the economic necessity that would later drive the development of the Watt engine in the 18th century. It existed in a vacuum of utility, a beautiful gear in a society that had not yet developed the teeth to turn it into an engine of industry. As we progress, we will see how the very structure of Roman power dictated that such a marvelous invention would eventually be discarded as a historical curiosity, destined to sit silent for nearly 2 millennia until the world was sufficiently transformed to understand its true earth-shaking potential. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. To understand why the Aeolipile remained a curiosity, one must look past the mechanics and into the stark economic reality of the Roman Empire. The primary obstacle to the industrialization of antiquity was not a lack of mechanical genius, but a surplus of human labor. The Roman economy was fundamentally built upon the institution of slavery. Millions of enslaved individuals, captured through relentless military expansion, provided a near-infinite and virtually free source of energy for the Roman elite. In a system where the cost of human labor is negligible, the economic incentive to develop labor-saving machines is effectively annihilated. Why invest the immense capital, technical labor, and experimental time required to refine a steam engine into an industrial prime mover when a dozen enslaved people could perform the same task for the cost of basic subsistence? This created a structural inertia that stifled technological innovation. The Roman elite viewed engineering prowess as a means to prestige, theater, or monumentality, not as a vehicle for increasing the efficiency of production. Furthermore, the Roman approach to commerce and wealth accumulation was drastically different from the mercantilist and capitalistic systems that defined the later Industrial Revolution. The Roman upper class, the senatorial and equestrian orders, derived their status and wealth primarily from land ownership, agriculture, and political patronage. Investment in industrial ventures, if it existed at all, was often seen as beneath the dignity of the landed aristocracy. Industry was largely localized, artisanal, and decentralized. The concept of scale, the idea that one should build a machine to replace the work of 100 men to increase profit margins, was conceptually foreign to an economy that favored small-scale, high-quality craft production for local markets. Without a burgeoning middle class of entrepreneurs incentivized to scale production, the demand for industrial power was simply non-existent. Heron's engine existed in a society that valued the artisan's hand, not the factory's output. We must also consider the intellectual isolation of Roman engineering. While Heron was a brilliant innovator, he was working within a tradition that prioritized pure geometry and philosophical inquiry over applied technology. The intellectual elite of the Roman world, heavily influenced by the Greco-Roman philosophical tradition, often viewed manual labor and the mechanical arts with a degree of disdain. This aristocratic intellectualism meant that the most brilliant minds were directed toward rhetoric, law, military administration, and philosophy, rather than the messy, pragmatic application of steam power. The Aeolipile was a manifestation of physics, a study of the properties of matter, which was considered a noble pursuit. However, the idea of applying that physics to drain a mine, pump water from a field, or power a textile mill was relegated to the domain of the lower-class tradesmen, people who lacked the intellectual resources or the political capital to iterate on Heron's designs. Additionally, the Roman Empire lacked the financial institutions that would later facilitate the Industrial Revolution in Britain. There were no joint stock companies, no stock exchanges, and limited mechanisms for mass capital mobilization required for long-term industrial projects. The Roman state was a military administrative apparatus that focused on tax collection, border security, and the provision of bread and circuses. It did not foster an environment of economic competition that would have forced manufacturers to seek efficiency through automation. The very stability of the Roman Empire, in its Pax Romana phase, acted as a double-edged sword. It provided the infrastructure and peace necessary for the spread of technology, but it also solidified a status quo that made revolutionary change appear unnecessary and, to the ruling class, potentially destabilizing. The Aeolipile, therefore, was not failing to trigger an industrial revolution because it was a bad machine. It failed because it was a machine born into a world that had no use for it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. While the socio-economic landscape of Rome prioritized human labor, we must also confront the technical reality, the manufacturing limitations of the 1st century. To build a steam engine capable of industrial scale work, something more powerful than a laboratory curiosity like the Aeolipile, one needs more than just the concept. One needs the material science to withstand high pressure, continuous operation. The Aeolipile was a low-pressure device. It operated by venting steam into the atmosphere, requiring only enough pressure to overcome the friction of its central axis. However, if Heron had attempted to scale this technology to power a mill or pump water, he would have immediately encountered the pressure barrier. To harness steam efficiently, a boiler must hold high pressure, superheated vapor. This requires high-quality wrought iron or steel, capable of withstanding thermal stress without cracking, warping, or exploding. Roman metallurgy was remarkably advanced in the context of weaponry, jewelry, and artistic casting, but it was fundamentally flawed for the demands of high-pressure engineering. The Roman process for smelting iron was largely artisanal, relying on charcoal-fueled bloomery furnaces. These produced a bloom of iron that was porous, often riddled with slag inclusions, and inconsistent in its carbon content. Without the ability to produce large-scale, uniform plates of high-tensile steel, any attempt to build a robust, pressurized boiler would have resulted in catastrophic failure. The Roman blacksmiths were masters of their trade, but they lacked the knowledge of carburization and quenching required to turn brittle iron into durable, pressure-resistant steel. They could forge a sword that could bend without breaking, but they could not fabricate a steam cylinder that could operate at 5 atmospheres of pressure for 10 hours a day. This metallurgical ceiling was exacerbated by a lack of precision machining. Heron's designs for the Aeolipile were hand-fitted, utilizing the skill of individual craftsmen to achieve a loose fit that allowed for rotation. But a functional steam engine requires a piston to move within a cylinder with a nearly airtight seal, the piston-to-cylinder fit. If the fit is too loose, the steam escapes, and the energy is lost. If it is too tight, the friction destroys the metal. In the 18th century, the breakthrough that allowed James Watt to succeed was not just his understanding of thermodynamics, but the availability of precision bored cylinders. John Wilkinson, an ironmaster, developed a boring machine for cannons that could achieve the necessary tolerances. Rome had no such capability. Their lathes were rudimentary, Their measuring tools lacked standardization, and the concept of mass-producing interchangeable, precision-machined parts was non-existent. Ultimately, the failure of the Aeolipile to evolve was a consequence of the missing link between scientific theory and industrial manufacturing. Heron understood the principle of the reaction turbine, but the physical world around him could not supply the components to make that principle work on a macro scale. He was trying to bridge the gap between antiquity and the industrial age, using materials meant for decorative bronze work and agricultural tools. The Roman world was excellent at engineering in stone and concrete, a rigid, static form of construction, but it was woefully ill-equipped for the dynamic, high-stress engineering required by steam power. They were masters of the physical world of static objects, but they had not yet developed the science of dynamic, pressurized systems. The Aeolipile was a brilliant idea, trapped in a bronze shell that simply could not hold the future it contained. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The divergence between the ancient Mediterranean and the modern industrial world was, in large part, an intellectual chasm. To understand the Aeolipile's fate, we must examine the Greco-Roman hierarchy of knowledge, which placed abstract philosophical inquiry and mathematical purity far above the basis utility of mechanical engineering. In the eyes of the Platonic and Aristotelian traditions, which permeated the educated elite, the physical world was a reflection of ideal forms. Mathematics was the language of the divine, a way to understand the cosmos. Engineering, by contrast, was associated with the manipulation of matter, the sweat of the brow, and the unpredictable nature of physical labor. Heron of Alexandria was a unique bridge between these worlds, yet he operated within a cultural framework that demanded his inventions be justified as curiosities or theatrical demonstrations, rather than tools for economic expansion. This intellectual environment fostered a science of the toy. The scholars of Alexandria were brilliant, but their brilliance was directed inward, toward the perfecting of existing systems. Their inventions, such as the automata used in temples to open doors magically or the clepsydra water clocks, were designed to inspire awe, demonstrate the power of the gods, or display the wealth of a benefactor. There was no cultural imperative to translate this ingenuity into efficiency. In the 18th century, by contrast, the scientific revolution was accompanied by a radical shift in philosophy. The belief that the physical world was a machine to be understood, taken apart, and optimized for human benefit. The Roman mind, conversely, was one of administration and maintenance. They were master logicians of law and governance, but they viewed the natural world as a set of static systems to be inhabited rather than a resource to be harvested through industrial exploitation. Furthermore, the Roman intellectual tradition lacked the feedback loop of applied science that defines modern engineering. In our world, a failure in a bridge or an engine is analyzed, documented, and turned into a lesson for the next iteration. In the ancient world, technical knowledge was often guarded, localized, or lost due to the lack of a standardized scientific literature. While Heron wrote extensively, his work was not part of a broader collaborative scientific community that could pressure test his designs. His manuscripts were individual achievements, isolated islands of genius. When the political and economic stability of the Roman Empire began to fray, these islands of knowledge were the first to be submerged. The intellectual culture did not value the iterative process. It valued the finished masterpiece. Once the Aeolipile was built as a successful showpiece, the inquiry ended. We also see a profound disconnect between the high-level thinkers and the low-level practitioners, the men who spent their lives building and maintaining the infrastructure of the empire, the master builders, the irrigation experts, the miners, were largely distinct from the philosophers and mathematicians who theorized about pneumatics. The former possessed the practical experience, but lacked the theoretical training to bridge the gap. The latter possessed the theory, but viewed the practical application as beneath them. The Aeolipile was a victim of this intellectual stratification. It sat in the dead zone between the ivory tower and the workshop. To become an engine of industry, it required a marriage of these two worlds, a merger that simply did not exist in the cultural DNA of the first century. The Roman Empire was a civilization of architects and orators, not of inventors and entrepreneurs. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. Cinematic wide shot, a sprawling ancient forest in the Mediterranean with laborers cutting timber, showcasing the primary energy source of the Roman world. Macro detail, a close-up of charcoal embers glowing in a clay furnace, representing the primary heat source for Roman metallurgy. Historical reconstruction, a Roman mining site where workers use manual pulleys and buckets, highlighting the lack of deep extraction technology. The resource, a large stack of split firewood, beautifully textured, contrasted against the dark, gritty, and mysterious piles of raw coal in the distance. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The Roman Empire was, first and foremost, a military enterprise. Its trajectory was defined not by industrial growth, but by the relentless pursuit of territorial security, administrative control, and political glory. This institutional obsession with military expansion served as a powerful, albeit unintended, deterrent to technological innovation. When the state's primary instrument of power is the legionary, a highly disciplined, mobile, and expendable human unit, the incentives for the ruling class become skewed toward logistics, fortification, and organizational hierarchy rather than the mechanical automation. The Roman military machine was optimized for the conquest and pacification of human populations, not the conquest of the physical environment through engineering. Consequently, the greatest minds of the era were channeled into the service of Mars, designing siege engines, constructing defensive walls, and mapping the infrastructure for troop movements. This militarization of engineering is visible in the evolution of Roman technology. While they did not develop steam engines, they achieved unprecedented feats in ballistic weaponry, such as the ballista and the onager. These were marvels of torsion physics, tensed rope mechanisms that stored enormous amounts of potential energy. However, unlike the steam engine, which is a continuous process machine, these were impulse-based systems designed for destruction. The intellectual energy that could have been directed toward refining the Aeolipile into a rotary power source was instead consumed by the need to perfect the trajectory of a stone projectile. The Roman state was a master of the short-term engineering solution, building a bridge over the Rhine in 10 days to move an army, or constructing a siege ramp to take a mountain fortress. These projects were spectacular displays of power that served immediate military goals, leaving little room for the long-term, capital-intensive research required to turn a laboratory toy into an industrial prime mover. Furthermore, the constant state of military expansion created a frontiersman mentality that valued mobility and durability over stationary industrial complexity. An empire that is constantly moving, expanding, and defending vast, porous borders has little need for centralized, steam-powered factories that would be impossible to defend and expensive to maintain. The Roman economy was decentralized, resilient, and built to survive in a world of political volatility. A steam-driven industrial base, conversely, requires a stable, centralized environment where massive amounts of capital can be sunk into fixed infrastructure. The Roman military ethos, which prized the individual valor of the soldier and the authority of the commander, was fundamentally at odds with a system that would elevate the technician or the factory owner to a position of economic dominance. We must also consider the role of displacement. By focusing so heavily on the logistical support of its military, the empire drained the intellectual and material resources of the Mediterranean. The best engineers were often recruited into the imperial bureaucracy or the military corps of engineers, architecti, where their work was strictly bound by military or state-sanctioned mandates. There was no private sector of invention where a creative thinker like Heron could freely pursue a dangerous, experimental, and potentially subversive technology. The state held a monopoly on grand-scale engineering. As long as the Roman legions were sufficient to maintain the status quo, there was no existential pressure to search for a new, revolutionary source of power. The military, by its very success, blinded the empire to the need for the very technology that would eventually become the hallmark of later, more fragile societies. The sword, in the Roman mind, was simply more practical than the engine. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The fate of Heron's Aeolipile is inextricably linked to the institutional fragility of ancient knowledge. Alexandria was not just a city. It was the repository of the Mediterranean's collective intellect, anchored by the Great Library and the Mautian. This environment was unique because it curated and protected technical knowledge, yet it was also profoundly vulnerable. Unlike the decentralized, print-based revolution that preserved the breakthroughs of the 18th century, Roman scientific knowledge existed on perishable papyrus scrolls, stored in centralized locations that were susceptible to fire, civil unrest, and political shifts. Heron's work on the Aeolipile was a masterpiece of documentation, but documentation is only as powerful as its accessibility. When the institutional support for Alexandrian scholarship waned, the path from theoretical invention to widespread application was severed. The bottleneck here was the lack of a democratized knowledge transfer system. In the modern world, once a blueprint is drawn, it can be replicated, distributed, and analyzed by thousands of engineers across the globe. In the 1st century, a design like the Aeolipile lived and died in the rooms where the scrolls were housed. If a scholar didn't copy the text, if the library was damaged by the fires of Caesar or later conflicts, or if the political patronage that funded these institutions evaporated, the technology vanished from the collective memory. The reliance on centralized knowledge hubs meant that scientific progress was always one disaster away from being reset. The Aeolipile was a victim of this fragility. It existed in a world that had not yet invented the backup, the systemic distribution of information that ensures that a good idea cannot be forgotten. Furthermore, we must examine the intellectual siloing that occurred within these institutions. The scholars in the Mautian were often subsidized by royalty, creating a culture where research was directed by the interests of the elite, rather than the needs of the broader populace. The Aeolipile was part of a curriculum of pneumatica, a branch of study that was highly academic and largely detached from the economic reality of the average citizen. There was no professional engineering guild or industrial association to take these ideas and push them into the marketplace. Without a mechanism for commercializing technical knowledge, the process where an idea moves from a library shelf to a factory floor, the innovation remained a prestige project. The knowledge was preserved, but it was essentially frozen in time, unable to evolve because it had no contact with the challenges of mass production. This institutional vulnerability highlights a stark contrast with the Industrial Revolution, which was driven by a vibrant, albeit often chaotic, marketplace of ideas. During the 18th century, patents, journals, and technical societies allowed inventors to build upon each other's work. In the Roman context, the intellectual ecosystems was a gated garden. When the gates were locked or the garden neglected, the knowledge withered. Heron was a genius who documented the future, but his society lacked the communicative infrastructure to build it. The history of the Aeolipile serves as a sobering reminder that innovation requires not just the spark of genius, but an infrastructure of survival. Without a robust, decentralized network to disseminate and stress test new technology, even the most brilliant invention is merely a ghost, waiting for a future that has the tools to sustain it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. To look at the Aeolipile and see a failed steam engine is to apply a modern lens of industrial capitalism to a civilization that prioritized entirely different values. The Roman world, particularly the Hellenistic sphere where Heron thrived, operated under an aesthetic and philosophical framework where technology was primarily a medium for thaumazein, the experience of wonder. In this context, the Aeolipile was a success. It achieved exactly what it was designed to do. It moved, it whirred, it exhaled steam, and it prompted the viewer to marvel at the cleverness of the human mind and the hidden powers of nature. To demand that it be a high-efficiency pump or a mill is to mistake a religious icon for a tool. The Romans did not lack the capacity for utility. They simply had a cultural surplus of wonder. This focus on the theatrical and the marvelous was deeply embedded in the social functions of technology. Heron's machines were often found in temples, where they were used to create miracles. The automatic opening of doors to the sound of trumpets, the pouring of libations by statues, or the mechanical singing of birds. These were not mere parlor tricks. They were essential components of the religious and political apparatus. They reinforced the power of the priesthood and the majesty of the state. Because these machines served such vital social purposes, there was no impetus to strip them of their ornamental casing, optimize them for cold industrial efficiency, and hide them inside a factory. A machine that does useful work in silence is a tool. A machine that performs a mechanical wonder in public is a symbol of authority. We must also consider the role of the aristocratic eye. The Roman elite, who acted as the primary patrons of such devices, were obsessed with the display of status. A steam engine that grinds wheat is a commodity, but an Aeolipile that spins gracefully on a mantle is a conversation piece, a testament to the patron's sophistication, patronage of the arts, and command over the natural world. This cultural preference for the decorative over the functional created a prestige trap. Inventors like Heron were incentivized to create machines that were increasingly complex and aesthetically pleasing, rather than machines that were increasingly robust and reliable. The innovation path was paved with ornamentation, not optimization. Furthermore, this cultural bias had a profound effect on the professional identity of the engineer. In the Roman world, the mechanikos, the master of machines, was not an industrial designer, but a master of stagecraft, architecture, and mathematics. They were valued for their ability to design siege engines for the emperor or fountains for the public squares. The professional reward system was geared toward visibility and grandeur. There was no social prestige or financial incentive for a lowly inventor to develop a boring, dirty, and dangerous steam-powered industry. The culture of wonder provided a comfortable, well-funded path for the brilliant engineer. Why would anyone choose the difficult, dirty, and unglamorous path of industrial transformation? The Aeolipile was not a failed invention. It was a perfect, finished, and highly successful piece of ancient performance art. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. A critical, yet often overlooked, Driver of the Industrial Revolution was the institutionalization of the incentive to invent. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the development of robust patent systems, which granted inventors a temporary monopoly on their ideas, transformed innovation from a high-risk, unrewarded hobby into a viable commercial strategy. In the Roman Empire, such a concept was entirely absent. There was no mechanism to protect, formalize, or profit from an intellectual breakthrough. If Heron of Alexandria had managed to turn the Aeolipile into a functional industrial pump, he would have had no legal framework to prevent others from copying, selling, or claiming the design as their own. In such a climate, the market for our ideas remains fundamentally broken because the risk-to-reward ratio is prohibitively skewed against the innovator. The Roman approach to knowledge was communal, or, more accurately, status-based rather than ownership-based. Scientific and mechanical knowledge were often treated as part of the public domain, or more commonly as trade secrets protected within insular guilds or family lineages. This guild secrecy model is the antithesis of the patent-based model. While patents require the inventor to disclose their invention to the public in exchange for a temporary monopoly, guilds demanded silence to maintain a competitive advantage. This prevented the cross-pollination of ideas. If a specific technique for casting brass or aligning a cylinder was known only to a small circle of craftsmen, that knowledge died with them, never becoming part of a broader, cumulative scientific record. Furthermore, the lack of intellectual property meant that there was no technological capital. In a modern economy, a company's value is often tied to its patents and R&D, the intangible assets it owns. In Rome, wealth was tangible: land, slaves, bullion, and political office. An invention could not be collateralized, sold as a license, or used as a foundation for a startup. If you were a brilliant engineer, your only path to security was to find a wealthy patron or hold a position in the imperial bureaucracy. This relegated invention to the status of a service rather than a business. You were paid for your time, not for the value of your output. As a result, the Roman economy failed to cultivate the inventor-entrepreneur archetype, the person who bets their livelihood on the potential of a new machine. Without the promise of future earnings through intellectual property, there was also no venture capital ecosystem. The elite were happy to fund a one-off machine for a banquet or a temple, but they were not interested in financing a multi-year effort to refine a technology that offered no clear mechanism for profit sharing. The legal and financial infrastructure of the empire was designed to manage taxes, land disputes, and inheritance, not the commercial exploitation of new mechanical processes. This legal inertia was a silent killer of innovation. The Aeolipile was a revolutionary idea, but it was legally and commercially homeless. It could not gain traction because the Roman world had no gears in its legal code that allowed technology to become a self-sustaining engine of growth. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The most potent economic barrier to the adoption of the Aeolipile was the Roman reliance on a massive, low-cost labor force. In an economy underpinned by slavery and a large population of underemployed free laborers, the cost of human energy was functionally negligible. For a Roman landowner or a state administrator, the choice between investing capital into a complex, high-maintenance steam machine or simply employing 10, 20, or 100 laborers to perform the same task was a simple calculus. In the former, you risk the failure of a temperamental, unproven, and expensive device. In the latter, you utilize a technology that is self-replicating, requires no fuel other than basic food, and possesses the flexibility of human intuition. This abundance of human power created an economic decoupling where the drive for mechanical productivity gains was essentially stifled at the source. This phenomenon is often described by economic historians as the high-level equilibrium trap. The Roman economy was highly productive, but it reached a state of stability where existing methods, based on human and animal muscle, water power, and wind, were good enough for the scale of demand. To shift to steam power would have required a massive infusion of capital into infrastructure, metallurgy, and training. A J-curve of investment that would have initially resulted in lower efficiency than the proven labor-intensive methods already in place. Without a labor shortage to drive wages up, there was no pain in the system to force the adoption of labor-saving technology. Slavery, ironically, was the ultimate anchor on industrial progress. It provided an endless supply of cheap energy, making the expensive development of machines appear not just unnecessary, but fiscally irresponsible. Furthermore, this abundance of labor influenced the very design of Roman society and its infrastructure. If you have an unlimited supply of muscle, you do not need to build highly efficient, centralized factories that require complex transportation networks for coal and raw materials. Instead, you can have decentralized, small-scale production located near the source of raw materials or the end consumers. The Roman economy was geared toward flexibility rather than throughput. A steam-driven system requires massive volume to amortize its high fixed costs. The Roman system was built for small-batch artisanal output. The existence of the Aeolipile did not threaten this model because it could not match the versatility and low entry cost of a human worker. We must also consider the psychological impact of this labor abundance on the Roman perception of work. When work is something that can be delegated to the lower classes or enslaved populations, the elite class, the ones with the capital, the political influence, and the education to drive innovation, have no incentive to engage with the mechanics of production. The Roman elite were managers of men, not managers of machines. They directed the flow of labor, not the flow of power. This created a social divide where the people who had the resources to fund the next industrial step were the least motivated to take it. The labor abundance did not just provide an economic alternative to the machine. It provided a social framework that made the machine irrelevant. In a world where you can command 100 men to move a stone, why would you dream of a machine to do it for you? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The trajectory of technological innovation is rarely linear. It is highly dependent on the geopolitical stability of the civilization in which it germinates. The Roman Empire, at its height, was a marvel of administrative and military cohesion, creating a long peace, Pax Romana, that provided the fertile soil for figures like Heron of Alexandria to exist. However, this same stability was ultimately fragile. As the empire began to face the mounting pressures of the 3rd century, economic inflation, constant border conflicts, political instability, and recurring plagues, the luxury of intellectual inquiry and experimental engineering began to evaporate. The Roman state shifted from a culture of expansion and innovation to one of preservation and survival. In this environment, long-term investments in experimental technologies like the Aeolipile were discarded in favor of immediate military and logistical triage. The geopolitical trap is that innovation often requires surplus resources, time, wealth, and security that a state under stress can no longer afford. When the administrative priority shifts to simply maintaining the walls, paying the legions, and keeping the food supply flowing, the frivolous or unproven projects of the intellectual elite are the first to be defunded. Heron's work, which flourished under a stable, wealthy Alexandria, became increasingly isolated as the central authority of the empire fractured. The fragmentation of the Mediterranean trade routes meant that the exchange of ideas slowed to a trickle. The scientific network, which relied on the safety and logistical ease of the Roman road and sea systems, began to collapse as those networks became dangerous, expensive, and unreliable. Furthermore, the Roman system of governance, highly centralized and dependent on the charisma and competence of the emperor, meant that progress was subject to the whims of the state. There was no independent scientific community or autonomous industrial base to carry the flame of innovation when the imperial machinery faltered. If an emperor was not interested in science, or if he was too preoccupied with civil war to support the motion, the funding and protection for experimental engineering disappeared. The Aeolipile was a product of the peak of Roman institutional power. It could not survive the empire's slow decline. The very political system that enabled its invention was the same one that prevented it from maturing into something resilient. This geopolitical fragility created a reset button effect. As the empire withered, the specialized knowledge required to build, maintain, and understand devices like the Aeolipile was lost. Unlike the printing press, which spread knowledge across a continent and made it impossible to delete, the knowledge of the steam engine was concentrated in a few individuals and a few brittle institutions. When those institutions were sacked or shuttered, the knowledge did not simply vanish. It was actively destroyed or abandoned because it no longer had a social or economic home. The decline of the empire was not just a political event. It was an intellectual catastrophe that effectively turned the clock back on technological potential for a millennium. The Aeolipile became a ghost, not because it failed as a machine, but because the world that had the capacity to build and sustain it had ceased to exist. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. As we reach the conclusion of this exploration, it becomes clear that the Aeolipile was never simply a failed steam engine. It was a mirror reflecting the fundamental character of Roman civilization. By examining why it remained a laboratory curiosity rather than a catalyst for an industrial revolution, we have uncovered a complex tapestry of economic, cultural, and political realities. The Roman world did not miss the Industrial Revolution because they were not smart enough. They missed it because they were living in an equilibrium that worked perfectly well for their needs. They valued stability, aesthetic wonder, and military hegemony over the disruptive, dangerous, and dirty path of mechanical mass production. The Aeolipile's shadow persists, not as a symbol of incompetence, but as a reminder of how deeply context dictates the trajectory of human progress. The tragedy of the Aeolipile is not that the Romans lacked the engineering genius to build it, but that they lacked the systemic incentives to sustain it. Progress, in the modern sense, is a collective compounding effort, a relay race where every generation stands on the shoulders of the last. The Roman system, by contrast, was a series of isolated, brilliant achievements that existed within a fragile institutional framework. When the infrastructure of that framework, the trade routes, the libraries, the patronage, and the political peace, began to fray, the knowledge had no place to go. It is a sobering lesson for our own era. Technology is only as robust as the society that supports it. We often mistake our current technological dominance for a permanent state of affairs, forgetting that knowledge can be unlearned, institutions can collapse, and the path not taken can become the only path left when the current one fails. Looking back, we can see that the Aeolipile was a proof of concept for a future that hadn't yet arrived. It demonstrated that humanity had unlocked the laws of thermodynamics, but it also proved that unlocking those laws is only the first step. The true barrier was not mechanical, but social and legal. Without a patent system to protect the innovator, without a labor market that valued efficiency over sheer numbers, and without an intellectual community that could cross-pollinate ideas across borders, the steam engine was destined to remain a ghost. Heron's machine was an object of beauty, but it was also a warning. Unless a civilization builds the foundations to host a revolution, the spark of genius will eventually flicker out, leaving behind only the cold, silent artifacts of what might have hacks. Today, as we stand in the midst of our own rapid technological acceleration, the Aeolipile remains a haunting symbol of potential. It reminds us that our inevitable progress is neither guaranteed nor immune to the same societal pressures that slowed the ancient world. The lesson of Rome is that even a civilization at the zenith of its power can reach a hard ceiling where the old ways are too comfortable to abandon, even when a new, transformative future is staring them in the face. We, like the Romans, live within a specific cultural and economic context that guides our innovations. The question for us is not whether we are capable of engineering the future, but whether we are capable of building a society resilient enough to ensure that the future we create doesn't become another path not taken. The Aeolipile may be a relic of the past, but its shadow still falls across our path, asking us to consider whether we are truly masters of our technology or merely guests in a system that we have yet to fully understand. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey.